I've heard that, gives me, I guess, some belief that something's been cooked up behind the scenes, and we're going to find out once, if and when that policy gets approved. And like you say, I think that is, no sure thing whatsoever, because the players' union, I just don't see a players' union which has been fairly tough and hard to deal with, and not inclined for compromise, signing on to HGH testing just because they've been promised, something else in return. To say it's going to happen and to see it happen are two different things. And I agree with you on that. It's unlikely that they're going to just lay down for HGH testing and for getting some concessions on marijuana.
And that's one of the things that's awesome to me about this is that's why they can't bring it to a vote with the Players Association. Because once you bring it to a vote, if they don't approve it, you've got all the public relations drama you need, because that is proof positive that there's something amiss here, and there's a reason that these players won't approve to this. You know what I mean? So that's why it's a no-win for the players, to me, in my opinion here, if that thing gets turned down. And the numbers don't work for me. I don't care if you want to say 60%, 50, 40, 30, no matter what. That's a significant enough number. Like I said at the beginning of the show, when you add the number of players using stuff, and I'm talking about performance-enhancing stuff, along with the percentage of people who, on their principle, will say, I don't believe in blood testing or I don't believe in game day testing, which, hey, some people legitimately do feel that way. It's just nowhere near as many as they act like it is. But I think when you combine those numbers, you'll never get to 60%. You'll never get 60% of those players to agree to that, especially if the percentage is as high as I say it is. And I'm giving a soft estimate. When I was talking to McMullen the other day, he said, bro, you're estimating it low. I said, I know, but I'm trying to be fair and say only half the players are using some sort of performance-enhancing something, because what was the baseball number? If we're being honest, 60-70% of those guys were on the sauce, at least the upper-level guys for sure. You know what I mean? So
and I'll just say one more thing about the whole drug testing issue. One thing that we've learned throughout this Josh Gordon escapade is the difference in enforcement mechanism and in testing mechanism between guys who got caught smoking pot in college, like Josh Gordon did, and your average NFL player who's not in, quote unquote, the system, the drug testing regimen. It's ridiculously easy for NFL players to avoid detection for smoking marijuana. They're only, if you're not already in the program. You hear about Josh Gordon passing 70 tests and having 70 negative tests over the 2 years or whatever that he's been in the league, and then his positive for codeine and this and that. And they can test him anytime they want. Every other player in the NFL, it's ridiculously easy to avoid detection. You get tested one time a year before training camp starts, or right around coinciding with the start of training camp in the summer, for a 2-week period where you have to be clean of pot, and even then it's random. Not every player is even tested. So, you can smoke pot 11 months out of the year and not even worry about it at all. It seems to me that is hardly a bargaining chip that the NFL office has when most 95% probably or more of NFL players don't have a concern about marijuana at all, and that they can smoke it with impunity as long as they're already under this heavy testing regimen that happens to first or second or third time abusers.
Dan, you hit it on the head. That's the other thing that we didn't even touch on, is what you just said, is how about all of the people who are not in the drug program, who know that all they have to do is take that one test and they're good to go. They could care less about this whole negotiation because they're not worried about it. They're not, so there's a lot of a lot of individual agendas that you need to try to get 60% of them together to agree on something. It's never been easy over the course of labor negotiation history in football or any sport. And I'm telling you, to think that, especially mid-season, you think some of these cats who are cheating are going to, in the middle of, like, it's one thing if you got the whole off-season to plan for this thing or whatever, but you're just going to go, 1 week I'm taking stuff, the next week I'm off, and now I got to, oh, come on, man. So,
yeah, the other thing to mention, Jerry, is that marijuana is recreational and is not something that affects on-field performance. And the players don't really care about it because it's easy to avoid detection. HGH, on the other hand, is something that if players aren't tested for it now, and they genuinely feel, with good reason, that it does affect their performance on the field, that it makes them better, faster, stronger, and consequently richer if they excel on the field and if they win games for their teams. And it very much is important to them in their careers on the football field, where marijuana is something, akin to, boating or fishing, a recreational pursuit that really doesn't have any impact on the field. So, I just think the one thing is probably much more valuable to them in terms of looking at giving it up or not being able to do it anymore, as opposed to how pot is, which doesn't really have an on-field impact.
You're right. It's recreational. A good equivalent is going fishing. Hey, we're going to negotiate for the right to go fishing anytime we want, as long as we catch no more than 6 fish at a time, But in exchange, we've got to give up our rifles, And all of a sudden, the NRA is saying, no. And it's the same thing. You can just change the terms. It's just funny, man. But we'll see. You guys want to sit around and hold your breath that Josh Gordon's coming back? I do think it's a possibility eventually, but I don't know that we even get there. I don't know that we even get there till this off season, where they may just say we're not going to get this thing done until the end of the season. So, whatever. But don't hold your breath, because if you do, you may find yourself gasping for air. But when he does come back, that's great. We'll talk about that down the road. We'll see. Somebody is going to report in the next 5 minutes that it's a done deal. Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe they were right this time. But anyways, hey, let's get down to the business before I got to let you go. Let's talk a little Buckeyes. Obviously, the funk sets in over this weekend, and now you got to get it out of the way. You can be unhappy. I know Urban Meyer, up in arms about things and things going to change or whatever, but you got to get back at it. You've got Kent State coming up here, and we know the history. Traditionally, you'd be looking past this, but you got to wonder, how much does last week stay in these guys' heads as they get ready to take on the Golden Flashes?
Well, I think the guys are probably, champing at the bit to get out there, and the Kent State Golden Flashes couldn't come along at a better time, frankly. Urban Meyer's situation, he was living a little bit of a charmed existence there, and obviously some of it is to his own credit that he won his first 24 games here, and he's now finding out about that fan support in Columbus that John Cooper used to talk about. He said, hey, Coach, we're with you, win or tie. We're behind you, win or tie. That was always a line that he liked to quote about.
We love you, win or tie.
Buckeyes fans, and then so he got a little taste of that, and of the criticism that comes with losing a football game, any football game at Ohio State, and frankly, I don't think he responded all that well to it. I think he pointed some fingers and threw out some excuses, and to me, they came across as kind of lame. I think it would have been much classier for him to take some of that on himself. I didn't hear, at least at any point, Urban Meyer talking about being out-coached, which I think clearly he was. He talked about, being unprepared for what Virginia Tech was going to do, and if that's not an example of being out-coached, I don't know what is. No plan B, no adjustments to speak of. Chris Ash was interviewed yesterday, and then he had some justifications and some rationale for why they had some problems. And yeah, certainly young players, especially in the back seven, adjusting to a new system and adjusting to playing college football for the first time, as many of them were, is legitimate as a reason for why things didn't go well for them on the defensive side of the ball. But in any event, like I said, the Flashes are coming along at just the right time. They're 0-2. They lost to South Alabama. They lost, I believe, Ohio was their other game. they're a passing team. I think what we can expect to see is more of the new look OSU pass defense, if it can be described as such. The Flashes throw the ball. They can't run the ball. Ken in their first 2 games has run the ball 50 times for 95 yards. You don't need to be a math major to know that's less than 2 yards a carry, and that's not effective rushing. They have thrown the ball 40 and 41 times, respectively, in their first 2 games. Now, last week, they only completed 17 out of 40 in a loss to South Alabama. So remains to be seen whether they'll be effective at it, but they will be, slinging it around the horseshoe on Saturday. They are a spread team. They're under Paul Haynes, a former OSU assistant in his second year. They've had quite a come down from the big season they had a couple years ago. They were 4-8 last year. So you don't expect a real competitive contest Saturday, especially if the Buckeyes come out breathing fire like you might expect they would after losing a home game for the first time since 2011.
Yeah, I definitely expect that. I saw some interesting stuff when just putting together my notes for the game. Of the 55 points that the Buckeyes have scored so far this season, 49 of them have been by freshmen and sophomores. 89% of the scoring. I know we talked about the youth and whether it's the skill players or whatnot. I found that interesting, though. So that's kind of a sign to the way things are pointing there. But I agree. I do think that clearly this is one where it comes at the right time, especially with Cincy looming, and that you've got an opportunity here to get back off the horse. Kent State, not a good start there, obviously, to their season. So their pass defense has been relatively effective in the speaking of the Golden Flashes in their first couple of losses here. So, perhaps that's something to keep an eye on. But again, I just see this being way too much on one side. Regardless of the situation, I'm with you, of the two teams. This is one of those, boy, am I glad it's homecoming week or whatever you want to call it. Boy, am I glad that game came when it did, like you said, because perhaps it, at least for a week, masks and cures some of those ills from the loss at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, that's true, and they have a bye week coming up after this game
right
to get ready for Cincinnati. We talked a little bit about. Cincinnati was scaring me even before they lost to Virginia Tech.
Yeah, you're right. You called it.
They're a solid team, and they'll have an extra week to prepare for them. So, yeah, it's a good time for this to happen, and I would expect normally you hope for a blowout in the sort of overmatched non-conference opponent games. Because you'll be able to see the young players play. Well, like you pointed out, we're seeing the young players play because that's what they've got on the offensive side of the ball, not only on the offensive line, but certainly in skill positions. And you take the bitter with the sweet. They're very, very talented, but they're also very green, and they're playing in front of huge crowds for the first time. And we saw some of that with Corey Smith on Saturday, dropping a couple of balls, and Jalen Marshall let a ball go through his hands. And there were plenty of mistakes, from kicking the ball out of bounds to shanking a punt to getting a 15-yard penalty on an out-of-bounds hit, and all those things that young players do when they get in the spotlight for the first time. So they've got a lot of wrinkles to iron out, and I think, as much as anything, I think it may be a blessing in disguise because, no one had an expectation of an undefeated season this year after Braxton went down. And if anything, if the coaches have been humbled somewhat by this, if the coaches have been forced to look in the mirror and talk about their preparation and the lack of plan B and the inability or unwillingness to adjust to what they were seeing on the field, and if that happens and they go back to the drawing board and do some things and get these kids, more prepared and do a better job themselves of preparation, and just take a little dose of humble pie, maybe that serves the program well. At least I hope that's the case, and I hope that's what happens.
Do you get a sense of that?
Yeah, I do. Now, I didn't in Meyer's comments. I think we talked Monday and a little bit about that there was really no mea culpa on Urban Meyer's part. He talked about, I'm disappointed in the wide receiver's ability to get separation, and he may be, but you don't single out a position group like that, and that's not real classy on the part of a head coach to do that, especially after a disappointing loss. I saw none of the taking it on myself. Of course, we're used to that because Tressel never did it either. As far as saying I was out coached, never heard those words from Tressel, and we had, I think, refreshingly had some candor from Meyer over the first couple of years. But it's easy to be candid and be self-critical when you won the game.
Yep.
Much less so. This is the first time in the regular season game, at least, where we've had an opportunity to hear